We've raised the necessary funds to not only bring the Papa team, Eric Lawyer, Raul Angulo, myself, and others, to Orlando to the National Fire Protection Association convention this June. I am so delighted to be a part of this honored team. We have some very special guests with us today. I'd like to introduce Raul Angulo, 38-year firefighter, retired now from the Seattle Fire Department, where he achieved captain status and has written the book on how to fight fires in structures. But not only that, we have now with us a very special guest from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, a firefighter of 26 years, Paul Kayley, who is able to come to Orlando as well, thanks to you, our incredible supporters out there. The reason we're bringing Paul all the way across the pond is because he wrote the report on World Trade Center 7 as it pertains to the firefighting industry. He made the film based on that report, calling out Bravo 7, which remains the definitive evidentiary-based documentary on World Trade Center 7. Without further ado, let me introduce my very special guests, Raul Angulo and Paul Kayley. Paul, let's start with you. Tell us why this issue is important to those in England and the UK, and why you wrote the report on this subject and the film.
Hi, Richard, and hi, Raul. I wrote my report studying building collapse back in 2015 as an evaluation of a potential new risk in operational firefighting after a colleague at work who was a FBU representative, the health and safety representative, showed me a video of WTC7 collapsing and told me that the official explanation for the collapse was due to normal office fires. Immediately upon seeing that, I was inclined to believe that he was mistaken in some way, and told him that he needs to go away and relook at the evidence because what he was saying wasn't feasible, wasn't possible. And if it were true, then it would contradict all of our well-established firefighting experience and procedures for dealing with high-rise fires and put firefighters at risk. And he was adamant that the facts that he would tell me were true, and he suggested that I go away and look at it. So I did. And in doing so, the more I looked, the more he was right and the more I was wrong in assuming that he was wrong. I basically went on a mission for about 3 months and delved into the official reports from the government and confirmed that what he said was true, that the government basically were claiming that this Type 1 fully fire protected steel frame building collapsed due to normal office fires, and it did so in an astounding way where it fell into its own footprints, and for a proportion of the fall it was at free fall, which again made absolutely no physical sense. That's why I delved into the details and wrote the report to try and identify and evaluate whether or not this risk was real and whether or not we needed to address our firefighting procedures.
And you had a survey that you developed for the local firefighters there. Why did you do this, and what were the results?
This survey came later. I needed a way to, after I made the film calling out Bravo 7, to get it in front of as many firefighters as I possibly could. So I managed to convince some of the bosses at the station that I was working at to allow me to show the video to colleagues at work on all 4 watches for their appraisal. And I told them at the end of the film that they'd be filling out a survey to give their opinion of what they saw in the film and whether or not it raised concern for them, and whether or not they felt that they needed to look into this matter in more detail, and whether a reinvestigation was required. And it was basically a way of getting the film in front of as many firefighters in a short period of time as possible in a consistent way, so that we could get back some feedback.
How many firefighters took the survey or saw it? aware of it.
It was roughly 60, so it was 4 watches of 15 at the time. That was back in 26 when I made the first edition of Calling Out Bravo 7. And virtually all of them, bar one, understood what the film was saying and appreciated that there was questions to be asked.
Okay, and what is the film saying?
It's basically highlighting all of the most pertinent evidence relating to Building 7 and the firefighting operations that took place, the anomalies with what NIST are claiming in terms of why firefighting was curtailed in the building, the claims they were making about the water supplies being deficient. And basically, it brings together all of the information in the most compact and compelling way that I could find, whilst making it hopefully interesting and delivering the information so that the people that watch it can go away and consider the facts without any other sideways distractions.
Excellent. Raul, let's jump back to you. I understand you saw this film quite a while ago and it affected you. What is it about this film?
To say the least, right? I wrote the textbook Engine Company Fireground Operations, 4th edition, and I had a high-rise chapter in there. When I'm writing the book, I'm looking at it as just getting all the information there. You never think about the marketing or where this book is going to end up or who's going to read it. And I know it goes all over the country, but I started getting contacted by a lot of people who were posing me questions in relation to Building 7. And I had to defend my work. There were a lot of questions I couldn't answer. And that's what I started calling Eric.
Eric Lawyer, Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, steward of Papa.
A Seattle firefighter. And so he told me, he sent me the Calling Out Bravo 7 video. And so I watched it numerous times, actually, because there was so much information in there, as Paul was saying. He wasn't even a believer, but once he did the research. Now, I'm really surprised, Paul, you did all that in 3 months, the research, because it would have taken me a year. But you draw upon your knowledge, you draw upon your common sense and everything you've been taught. And when you're provided with the facts, you have to come up with a different conclusion than what the official narrative is. And none of that made sense. The Calling Out Bravo 7 documentary also had a tremendous amount of video of Building 7 collapse, which I had never really seen. I think I saw it maybe on September 11th or shortly after, but everything is focused around the 2 towers, that there wasn't a lot of attention paid to Building 7. And most people don't even know that there were 3 buildings that collapsed. And certainly the new generation of firefighters don't know that. But the crux of the matter is that Paul's right. It poses the question, this Building 7 is going to collapse under normal fire conditions, totally collapse, complete catastrophic free fall collapse. That has to be mentioned in our strategy and tactics. And it isn't. I didn't mention it in my book. And I know that the newest book written from the 2 chiefs from FDNY, they don't mention it in their book. And the newest edition is High Rise Firefighting by Jerry Tracy, and I'm trying to blank on the other 2 guys right now. But NFPA 1700 is the 3rd edition, the 3rd book. That's the newest structural guide for firefighting. It has no mention of any sort of catastrophic failure due to thermal expansion and attack of the steel structures. In talking more to Paul and other people who are more aware of it, that's when I found out also that no high-rise building in North America that's a Type 1 construction, not talking about hybrids here, but that would be built under the international code under Type 1, has ever collapsed during fire. Now, the first interstate fire in Los Angeles is still one of the primary case studies of high-rise firefighting. And Building 7 was nowhere near the magnitude of First Interstate and One Meridian Plaza as well. That was a substantial case study for the United States in Philadelphia, where 3 firefighters died, and that building did not collapse. And that posed a series of dilemmas for me, so to say, as a writer, and to continue to write on for future subject matter, that either we're going to pay attention to the facts that we're seeing brought up by Paul, or we're not. And I don't see how you can ignore them after you see it. To draw the conclusion and go against the official narrative is a difficult bridge to cross, because you want to believe NFPA, you want to believe NIST, you want to believe UL, you want to believe all these organizations that are giving us information so that we can apply it on the emergency fire ground. And so it has to be accurate. It has to be information that has integrity. But the NIST report from Building 7 just doesn't pass the smell test. And Paul brings up a lot of these issues in the documentary. But to me, the clincher is, and I had never heard of it, the documentary also introduces the University of Alaska study by Professor Halsey, where he took all his graduate students and other PhD architects, and they did their own computer simulation. The NIST report was a computer simulation. They didn't have any evidence there. They didn't go and sift through any evidence because it was cleared out, and that's another story in itself. The University of Alaska did the same type of technique, and they came up with a totally different conclusion. That makes sense. When you hear that one, it makes sense. It's common sense. You go, of course. It's really stretching to accept the NIST report on that one. And I think that Paul did an excellent job at tying it all together, where if you're going to be honest with yourself after watching it, you have no other choice to conclude that it did not collapse according to the official narrative.
Why is that so important to not just American firefighters, Paul, but to firefighters around the world?
Basically, because we apply the same strategy, almost identical for high-rise firefighting when it comes to deploying a forward control point. We call it a bridgehead, and it's 2 floors below the fire floors.
Right.
We advance deep into the building, carrying equipment, water supplies. We'll use risers, and basically we'll use this forward control point as a vantage point so that we don't have to set one up outside and then put firefighters under air and then expect them to climb all the way up to the fire floor under air. And by the time they get there, they've run out of air. So we have this forward control point ready for them to go in there. And these forward control points, or bridgeheads, are basically built into our operational procedures for fighting high-rise fires, because we know that these well-engineered buildings are designed to compartmentalize and withstand the rigors of a fully developed fire.
And Paul's right. And the reason why this is such an important issue is because if we're going to give any credence at all to what NIST is saying, then we have to change our strategy and tactics. And for firefighters not even to be aware of this, NIST leaves you no other choice but to change the strategy to everybody get out of the building. This building's coming down. And you know what? This information goes out to the public. My book goes out to non-firefighters as well. And so they're asking the same questions. People that see calling out Bravo 7, the public also has concern about this. Are these buildings going to collapse on us? And we're going to go, no, of course not.
Because you ask them to stay in place, don't you?
Yeah, we're asking them to stay in place, or we're going to move you 10 floors below the fire, or we don't want to dump the building. Dump the building means evacuate the entire occupancy of a high-rise. That could be thousands and thousands of people. And it's a logistical nightmare. So that's not what we want. But if buildings are going to come down, then we have no other choice but to get everybody out of the building. There's the dilemma.
You have that dilemma, Paul, in England as well. And how does that relate to the Grenfell Tower?
There was problems with the fire control on that day, knowing whether to tell people to stay in place, stay put, because if the building had performed the way that it was designed to perform, they'd close their doors and then they'd be in a compartment that was fireproof. Unfortunately, a retrofitted exterior cladding system failed because they used materials that were flammable, and the fire was able to spread up the outside of the building and reach compartments on the outside of the building through windows. In normal circumstances, Grenfell should have been an entirely safe situation where residents would have been asked to stay put. Firefighters would have gone in, dealt with the fire wherever it was and whatever floor it was, whatever compartment it was in, contained the fire, and then they would have been safe. However, because the fire was spreading outside and it's basically gone beyond the specified requirements of the building, that made it more dangerous. But it does call into question for lots of residents around the UK who live in high rises, are we safe to stay in these buildings when they're on fire? And this contradiction that we've got from a well-respected institution in America, NIST, saying that normal office fires can cause these buildings to just collapse suddenly, calls it all into question. Should you stay put or should you leave the building? Now, residents need to be asking those questions. Now, who do they believe? The fire services, who for decades have said these buildings are safe and you are safe to stay in place and wait to be rescued, or NIST, who say that you need to get out because the building's going to collapse. And NIST, in their report, they made provision in their report for recommendations that evacuation procedures and building codes needed to be addressed. So they were openly and clearly demonstrating that they didn't think this was a one-off situation. They believed that it could happen again. So it needs to be investigated properly. And these anomalies and these contradictions need to be addressed.
I think that Tower 1 and 2 and Building 7, because of the tragic life loss, nobody could focus on anything other than Tower 1 and 2. But I've been saying, now that I'm informed more on Building 7, that had Building 7 fire happened on any other day other than September 11th, just an isolated incident, that would be the case study of the century. We'd be studying that building collapse. It would be the hot topic for years and years, because it just doesn't happen that often. And the deal, and Paul's right, because NIST can say that, and we're taking it at face value. Well, what puts me in a difficult situation, and people like me, is that there's very few authors. I'm not talking about magazine authors. I'm talking about textbook writers. There's very few of us that are writing on high-rise fire. I mean, less than 10 in the country. And we're putting out textbooks. We're putting out, this is how you should do it. And so there's a tremendous amount of responsibility on my part to really track down, okay, what's accurate and what isn't. I'm not just going to regurgitate something that comes out of NIST when it's going against now my gut feeling and put it out there for firefighters. I can't. I have to defend the integrity of the work and take into consideration all the information that Paul has exposed.
And these are the messages that we are bringing to the National Fire Protection Association's convention, more than 1,000 attendees. We have the evidence booth on the floor of the expo, and Paul will be there. Eric Lawyer will be there. There'll be another firefighter also, we expect, and a couple of fire protection engineers joining us in the booth, educating the fire protection professionals, engineers and firefighters attending this annual convention, where we've got the Raul's book, which will be on the table. We've got the film by Paul Kayley, which will be on the table, and the report that Paul has done. We have a lot of important handouts, our cards. We'll be handing out also the announcement that Paul and Raul and Eric and I will be presenting for a half an hour in the theater on the expo floor, the dilemma to 56 fire protection professionals. We're very excited about that on the third day of the conference, June 17 to 19. You have made this possible, you guys who are supporters of protectingallprotectorsalliance.org, and we're so grateful to you. Final thoughts from Paul and Raul.
Yep, looking forward to the convention. Hopefully we have a positive impact and wake up some giants.
I love that's a great quote. I would just like to say to those who are watching this and who are considered still supporting, to have Paul Kayley come to this event is, how should I put it? It has the potential of being like a tsunami, I think, because it woke me up. And to have this man here, I think, is going to be something that he's going to garnish a lot of attention from American and international firefighters. So,
yeah, I think so too, and we're grateful, Paul, that you have making the time to come to America to help us wake up our firefighters, as you have done a yeoman's job in Yorkshire.
Thank you. And it's a great honor to be invited and look forward to it.
Great. And thanks everybody for sending us to this all important NFPA convention in Orlando this summer. We are going to stir it up and educate and help make aware the firefighters and fire protection engineers in this country. So thanks for your part.